Today in our scripture, there is not much need for commentary, but more just action on our own part. The parable of Jesus is strong enough and clear enough as he talks about the generosity of the King, representative of the Father, who was so generous in his forgiveness and reconciliation, and the debtor who, though forgiven himself, refuses to forgive. It's a powerful image that Jesus presents there. It's one that's the message of which is evident enough. It is taking the message from that first reading today from Sirach and just putting it in a little bit more human imagery. But that reading from Sirach, the first part of that is very powerful and important. It says, "Wrath and anger are hateful things, yet the sinner hugs them tight." Wrath and anger are being hugged tight. "The vengeful will suffer the Lord's vengeance, for he remembers their sins in detail. Forgive your neighbor's injustice, and then when you pray, your own sins will be forgiven. Could anyone nourish anger against another and expect healing from the Lord? Could anyone refuse mercy to another like himself? And then can he seek pardon for his own sins?" Powerful words, a powerful challenge to us, that we realize that we are called not only to be forgiven, but to forgive. And how important it is for us to realize God's merciful forgiveness, first of all. That we are the recipients of God's tremendous mercy, no matter what sin we have committed, no matter how we have offended the Lord, offended others, compromised ourselves. God's forgiveness is there for us. It is but for us to open ourselves up to that forgiveness. God's forgiveness, in a sense, is a foolish forgiveness. It's an extravagant forgiveness. It was a forgiveness that was won by the power and the price of the cross. But it's a forgiveness that is readily available to each and every one of us. And it's important for us to appreciate how much the Lord forgives us. But then the challenge is, do I reflect that same spirit in my own life? Do I reflect a spirit of forgiveness in my relationships, in my home, with my family? Do I reflect that same forgiveness within my relationships at work or with my neighbors? Or do I somehow not expect that I need to forgive as I am called to be forgiven? I'm reminded of the words of Mark Twain, who once said, "I'm concerned not about the scripture passages that I don't understand, but about those that I do." Jesus gives us very, very strong messages, and it's easy for us to understand them. But it's a greater challenge for us to apply them and to live them. We are called to be forgiving people. Some of us are very easy in allowing forgiveness to take place. As one person expressed after the 10 o'clock Mass, "It's easy for me to forgive. I'm so forgetful. I always forgive." Others, though, are not very forgetful, and they tend to hold on to that unforgiveness within their heart. And the unforgiveness is not just towards other people. One of the things that hadn't really surprised me, but I'm certainly aware of as a priest, is how often we have difficulty in forgiving ourselves. We carry the weight and the burden of the past with us. And even when God has forgiven us, we still hold on to that unforgiveness for ourselves. And Jesus invites us to, yes, be forgiving to ourselves, of letting that guilt letting that unforgiveness to go. But also in a very special way as well towards other people. And how often we can remember from 20 years ago what our spouse did that hurt us, that offended us. And somehow we can hold that tight rather than letting it go and moving on with our life. And so we are invited to become ever more forgiving people. And how that is done is probably different for all of us. Some of us can just be very forgetful and allow it to go in that way. Others, because the wound has been deep and hurtful, we really need to pray about it because we can't do it just on our own human strength. We need to pray for the person who's offended us, or pray for the person whom we have offended, and to pray that God's grace will transform lives. And it may or may not change the other person, but I will guarantee that regular prayer for someone with whom we have experienced some problem or challenge, it will change us. It will gradually transform our own heart to allow us to let go and to move forward in a forgiving love. We are also reminded that sometimes we just have to take ourselves or that other person and put them at the foot of the cross. Every day to take ourselves or the person who's hurt us and put them at the foot of the cross. And praying that that mercy and that love of Jesus may touch their hearts, touch our hearts, bring about transformation and new life. We're all very much aware that the Our Father has that little hook in it, once again reflecting what Jesus is teaching us here. As we so glibly say, forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. Which basically says, if I'm not willing to forgive God, don't you forgive me either. What a challenge that can be for us. To pray that prayer with sincerity. Yes, Lord, I know your forgiveness, but I also know with your grace that I can be forgiving as well. It's a challenging message that Jesus gives us. Forgive with the generosity with which I forgive you.